너무 시끄럽다. 4K 60 film. Chapter 2 Intro Info. The first keystone in understanding the human condition is the concept of entropy or disorder, which emerged from 19th century physics and was defined in its current form by the physicist Ludwig Boltzmann. The second law of thermodynamics states that in an isolated system, one that is not interacting with its environment, entropy never decreases. The fourth law is that energy is conserved. The third that temperatures of absolute zero is unreachable. Closed systems inexorably become less structured, less organized, less viable, able to accomplish interesting and useful outcomes until they slide into an equilibrium of gray tapes, homogeneous monotony, and stay there. In its original formulation, the second law referred to the process in which usable energy in the form of difference in temperature between two bodies is inevitably dissipated as heat flows from the warmer to the cooler body. As the musical theme, Flinders Swan explained, you can't pass heat from the cold to the hotter. Try it if you like, but you far better not to. A cup of coffee, unless it is placed on a pleasant and hot plate, will cool down when the core beating a steam engine is used up. The current of steam on one side of a piston can no longer budge it because the warm-up steam and air on the other side are pushing back just as hard. Once it was appreciated that heat is not an invisible fluid but the energy in moving molecules, and that a difference in temperature between two bodies consists of a difference in the average speed of those molecules. A more general statistical version of the concept of entropy and the second law took shape. Now, order could be characterized in terms of the set of a microscopically distinct state of a system. In the original example involving heat, the possible speeds and position of all the molecules in the two bodies. Of all these states, the ones that we find useful from a bird's eye view, such as one body being hotter than the other, which is translated into the average speed of the molecules in one body being higher than the average speed in the other, make up a tiny fraction of the possibilities, while all the disorderly or useless states, the ones without a temperature difference, in which the average speeds in the two bodies are the same, make up the vast majority. It follows that any perturbation of a system, whether it is random jiggling of its parts or a whack from the outside, will, by the laws of probability, nudge the system toward disorder or uselessness, not become natural strive for disorder, but because there are so many more ways of being disorderly than of being orderly. If you walk away from Sandcastle, it won't be there tomorrow, because as the wind waves, seagulls and small children push the grains of sand around, they are more likely to arrange them into one of the best number of configurations that don't look like a castle than into the tiny few that do. I will often refer to the statistical version of the second law, which does not apply specifically to temperature difference even evening out, but to other dissipating as the law of entropy. How is entropy relevant to human affairs? Life and happiness depend on an infinitesimal sliver of earthly arrangements of matter amidst the astronomical number of possibilities. Our bodies are improbable assemblies of molecules, and they maintain that order with the help of other improbabilities. The few substances that can nourish us, the few materials in the few shapes that can cross us, shelter us, and move things around to our linking. Far more of the arrangements of matter found on Earth are of no worldly use to us. So when things change without a human agent directing the change, they are likely to change for the worse. The law of entropy is widely acknowledged in everyday life in things such as things fall apart, lost never sleeps, shit happens. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and from the Texas lawmaker Sam Bailbum, any Jenkins can kick down a bomb, but it takes a carpenter to build one. Scientists appreciate that the second law is far more than an explanation of everyday nuisance. It is the foundation of our understanding of the universe and our place in 1928. The physicist Arthur E. Eddington wrote, "The law that entropy always increases. Horace, I think the supreme position among the law nature, if someone points out to you that your pet theory of the universe is in disagreement with Maxwell's equations, then so much the worse for Maxwell equations. If it is found to be contradicted by observation, well, these experimentalists do bungle things sometimes. But if your theory is found to be against the second law of thermodynamics, I can give you no hope. There is nothing for it but to collapse in deepest humiliation." In his famous 1959 lectures, published as The Two Crushes and the Scientific Revolution, the scientist and the novice C.P. Snow commented on the disdain for science among educated Britons in his day. "A good many times I have been present at gathering of people who by the standards of the traditional culture are thought highly educated, and who have with considerable gusto been expressing their incredulity at the illiteracy of scientists. Once or twice I have been provoked and have asked the company how many of them could describe the second law of thermodynamics. The response was curt. It was also negative. And I was asking something which is about the scientific equivalent of have you read a work have you read a work of Shakespeare's? The chemist Peter Atkins alludes to the second law in the title of his book, Four Laws That Drive the Universe, and closer to home, The evolutionary psychologist John to be later Cosmith and Clark Bertrand untitled a recent paper on the foundation of the science of mind. The second law of thermodynamics is the first law of psychology. Wider away, for the second law from an Olympian vantage point. It defines the fate of the universe and the ultimate purpose of life, mind, and human striving to deploy energy and knowledge to fight back the tide of entropy and carve out refuse of beneficial order. From a terrestrial vantage point, we can get more specific. But before we get to familiar ground, I need to lay out the other two foundational ideas. At first glance, the law of entropy would seem to allow for only a discouraging history and a depressing future. The universe began in a state of low entropy, the Big Bang, with its unfathomably dense concentration of energy. From there, everything went downhill with the universe dispersing as it will continue to do into a thin greener goodyear of parties in evenly and sparsely in distributed through space. It really obscures the universe as we find it is not features grow, it is enlivened with galas, plants, mountains, clouds, snowflake, and an efflorescence of flora and fauna, including us. One is the cosmos is filled with so much interesting stuff. Is a set of wow. Of processes called self-organization, which allow circumscribed zones of order to emerge. When energy is poured into a system and the system dissipates that energy in its light toward entropy, it can become poised in an order. Indeed, beautiful configuration, a starburst with full crystal or a fracture. The fact that we find these configurations beautiful incidentally suggests that beauty may not just be in the eye of the beholder. The brain's aesthetic response may be receptiveness to the counter-entropic patterns that can spring forth from nature. But there is another kind of orderliness in nature that also must be explained. Not the elegant symmetry and the rhythms in the physical world, but the functional design in the living world. Living things are made of organs that have heterogeneous parts which are uncannily shaped and arranged to do things that keep the organism alive. That is, continue to observe energy to resist entropy. The customary illustration of biological design is the eye, but I will make the point with my second favorite sense organ. The human ear contains an elastic drum head that vibrates in response to the slice disc put foot of air. A bony lever that multiplies the vibration force of piston that impresses the vibration into the fluid in a long tunnel, conveniently coiled to fit inside the wall of the screw. A tapering membrane that runs down the length of the tunnel and physically separates the waveform into its harmonics, and an array of cells with tiny hairs that were flexed back bend, forced by the vibrating membranes sending a train of electrical impulse to the brain. It is impossible to explain why these membranes and bones and fluids and hairs are arranged in that improbable way without knowing that this configuration allows the brain to register pattern sounds, even the fuzzy outer ear, as asymmetrical top to bottom and front to back, and crimped with larger ridges and bolus. It's tracked in a way that skirts the incoming sound to inform the brain whether the sound maker is above or below, in front or behind. Organisms are replete with improbable configuration of feel-like eyes, ears, hearts, and stomach which cry out for an explanation. Before Charles Darwin and Alfredus was provided in 1859, it was reasonable to think they were the handiwork of a divine designer. One of the reasons I suspect that many Enlightenment thinkers were these rather than outright atheists. Darwin and Wallace made the designer unnecessary. One sort of organizing process of physics and chemistry gave rise to configuration of matter that could replicate itself. The copies would make copies, which would make copies of the copies, and so on in an exponential explosion. The replicating system would compete for the material to make their copies and the energy to power the replication, since no copying process is perfect. The law of entropy sees to that errors will crop up, and through most of this mutation will degrade the replicator. Occasionally, a dumb block will throw one up that's more effective at replicating, and its descendant will swap the competition as copying errors that enhance stability and replication accumulates over the generations. The replicating system weaker in an organism will appear to have been engineered for surviving and reproduction in the future. Through it only preserves the copying errors that led to survival and reproduction in the past. Creationists commonly doctors the second law of the thermodynamics to claim that the biological evolution, an increase in order over time, is physically impossible. The part of the law they omit is in a cross list here. Oh, oh, 졸려. 지루해. 준비할 벌써 20분이 남았네. 어떡하지? In a closed system, organisms are open system. They capture energy from the sun, food, or oxygen event to carve out temporary pockets of odor in their bodies and nest while they dump heat and waste into the environment, increasing disorder in the world as a whole. Organisms use of energy to maintain their integrity against the press of entropy is a modern explanation of the principle of continuous effort of striving, which Spinoza and defined as the endeavor to persist and flourish in one's own being, and which was the foundation of several Enlightenment era theories of life and mind. The ironclad requirement to suck energy out of the environment leads to one of the tragedies of living things, while plants bask in solar energy, and the few creatures of the briny deep soak up the chemical bursts spewing from cracks in the ocean floor. Animals are born exploiters. They live off the hard-won energy stored in the bodies of plants and other animals by eating them. So do the viruses, bacteria, and other pathogens and parasites that gnaw at bodies from the inside. With the exception of frosts, everything we care for is the body part of energy store of some other organism, which is just as soon keep that treasure for itself. Nature is a world, and much of what captures our attention in the nature world is an arm's length. Prey animals protect themselves with shards, spines, claws, horn, venom, camouflage, flight, or self-defense. Plants have dormantly lens, bark, and elations and poison saturating their tissue. Animals evolve weapons to penetrate these defense. Carnivores have speed, talons, and eager eye vision, while herbivores have grinding teeth and livers that detoxify natural poison. And now we come to the third keystone: information. Information may be true of as a reduction in entropy as the ingredients that distinguishes an order is too difficult to read. This book is so deep and difficult contents in the book. Oh, brainstorming. Oh. Okay. Imagine pages of random characters tapped out by a monkey at a typewriter, or a stretch of white noise from a radio tuned between channels, or screen full of confetti from a correct computer file. Each of these objects can take trillions of different forms, each as boring as the next. But now suppose that the devices are controlled by a signal that arranges the characters or sound wave or pixels into the pattern that correlation with something in the words. The Declaration of Independence, the offering birds of Hey Jude, a cat wearing sunglasses. We say that the signal transmits information about the declaration, while the song, while the cat The information contained in a pattern depends on how closely or finally gained our view of the world is. If we cared about the ex, ex, exact exact sequence of characters in the monkey outfit, or the precise difference between one burst of noise and another, where the particular pattern of pixel in just one of the haphazard displays, then we would have to say that each of the items contains the same amount of information as the others. Indeed, the interesting ones would contain less information, because when you look at one part, like the letter Q, you can guess others, such as the following letter U, without needing the signal. But more commonly, we lump together the immense majority of random-looking configuration as equivalently boring, and distinguish them all from the tiny few that correlates with something else. From that vantage point, the chatbot contains more information than the confetti of picture, because it takes a garrulous message to pinpoint a layer orderly configuration out of the best number of equivalently disorderly ones. To say that the universe is orderly rather than random is to say that it contains information in this sense. Some physicists in sharing information as one of the basic constituents of the universe, together with matter and energy. Information is what gets accumulated in accumulating in a genome in the course of evolution. The sequence of bases in a DNA molecule correlates with the sequence of amino acids in the proteins that make up the organism body, and they got that sequence by structuring the organism ancestors, reducing their entropy into the improbable configuration that allowed them to capture energy and grow and reproduce. Information is also collected by an animal's nervous system as it lives its life. When the ear transduces sounds into the neural firings, the two physical processes, vibrating air and diffusing ions, could not be more different, but thanks to the correlation between them, the pattern of neural activity in the animal brain carries information about the sound in the world. From there, the information can switch from electrical to chemical and back as it crosses the synapses, connecting one neuron to the next. Through all this physical transformation, the information is preserved. A moment to discover of 20th century theoretical neuroscience is that network of neurons not only can preserve information but can transform it in ways that allows us to explain how brains can be intelligent. Ooh. Ooh. Two input neurons can be connected to an output neuron in such a way that their firing patterns correspond to logical relation. such as and or and not or to a statistical decision that depend on the weight of the incoming evidence. That gives neural networks the power to engage in information processing or computation. Given a large enough network built out of these logical and statistical circuits, and with billions of neurons, the brain has room for plenty. A brain can compute complex functions. The prerequisite for intelligence. It can transform the information about the world that it receives from the sense organs in a way that mirrors the laws governing that world, which in turn allows it to make useful inference and predictions, internal representations that reliably correlate with states of the world, and that participate in inference that tend to derive true implication from true premise. Maybe cross knowledge, we say that someone knows what a robin is if she thinks the dot robin whenever she sees one, and if she can infer that it is a kind of bird which appears in the spring and pulls worm out of the ground. Getting back to evolution, a brain wires by information in the genome to perform computation on information coming in from the sense could organize the animal's behavior in a way that allowed it to capture energy and reduce entropy. It could, for example, implement the rule: if it squeaks, chase it; if it barks, flee from it. Chasing and fleeing through are not just sequence of muscular contractions, they are goal-directed. Chasing may consist of running, or climbing, or leaping, or abusing, depending on the circumstance, as long as it increases the chance of snagging the prey. Fleeing may include hiding or freezing or zigzagging, and that bring up another moment to 20th century ideas, sometimes called cybernetics feedback or control. The idea explains how a physical system can appear to be teleological, that is directed by purpose or goals. Origins are a way of sensing the state of itself and its environment, or representation of a goal states what is wants, what is trying for. An ability to compute the difference between the current state and the goal state, and the repertoire of action that are tagged with their typical effects. If the system is weird so that it triggers actions that typically reduce the difference. Ooh, shit. 한 시간은 걸리겠는데 이거? 시간 넘게 걸리겠는데? Between the current state and the goal state, it can be said to pursue goals, and when the world is sufficiently predictable, it will attain them. The principle was discovered by natural selection in the form of homeostasis, as when our bodies regulate their temperature by shivering and sweating. When it was discovered by humans, it was engineered into analog systems like thermostats and cruise control, and then into digital system like chess, playing programs, and autonomous robots. The principle of innovation, computation, and control bridge the trace between the physical world of cause and effect and the mental world of knowledge, intelligence, and purpose. Is not just rhetorical aspiration to say that ideas can change the world. It's a fact about the physical makeup of the brain. The Enlightenment thinkers had an inkling that thought could consist of patterns in matter. They linked ideas to impressions in wax, vibrations in a string, or waves from a boat, and some lack of proofs that listening is but reckoning in the original sense of reckoning as calculation, but before the concept of information and computation were elucidated, it was reasonable for someone to be minded by the list and attribute mental life to an immaterial soul, just as before the concept of evolution was elucidated. It was reasonable to be a creationist and attribute design in nature to a cosmic designer. That's another reason I suspect that so many Enlightenment thinkers were deceased. Uh, of course, it's nature to think twice about whether your cell phone truly knows a favorite number. Your GPS is really figuring out the best route home, and your Roomba is generally trying to clean the floor. But as information processing systems become more sophisticated, as their representations of the world become richer, their goals are arranged into the hierarchies of sub-goals within sub-goals, and their actions for attaining the goals become more diverse and less predictable. It starts to look like a hominid communism to insist that they don't. Whether information and computation explain consciousness, in addition to knowledge, intelligence, and purpose, is a question I will turn to in the final chapter. Okay? 어려 한날 어 Human intelligence remains the benchmark for the artificial kinds. And what makes Homo sapiens an unusual species is that our ancestors invest in bigger brains that collect more information about the world, reason about in more sophisticated ways, and deployed a greater variety of actions to achieve their goals. They specialize in the cognitive niches, also called the culture niche and the hunter-gatherer niche. This embraces a suite of new adaptations, including the ability to manipulate mental models of the world and predict what would happen if one tried wild use things, the ability to cooperate with others, which allows some teams of people to accomplish what is a single person could not, and the language, which allowed them to coordinate their action and to pour the fruits of their experience into the correction of skills and norms with cultures. This investment allowed early hominids to defeat the defense of a wide range of plants and animals and lack the bounty in energy, which is stuck their expanding brain, giving them still more know-how and access to still more energy. A well-studied contemporary hunter-gatherer tribe, the Haja of Tanzania, who live in the ecosystem where more modern humans first evolved and probably preserve much of their lifestyle, extract 3,000 calories daily per person from more than 88 of species. They create their menu through ingenious and uniquely human ways of foraging, such as filling large animals with poison-tipped arrows, smoking baths out of their hives to steal their honey, and enhancing the nutritional value of meat and turbot by cooking them. Energy channeled by knowledge is the elixir with which we stave off entropy. And advance in energy captures are advance in human destiny. The invention of farming around 10,000 years ago multiplied the availability of calories from cultivated plants and domesticated animals, uh, freed a portion of the population from the demands of hunting and gathering, and eventually gave them the luxury of writing, thinking, and accumulating their ideas around 500 BCE in what the philosopher Karl called the Arctic Age. Several widely separated cultures pivoted from systems of ritual and sacrifice that morally were worthy of misfortune to systems of philosophical and religions belief that promoted selfish needs and promised spiritual transcendence. Taoism and Confucianism in China, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism in India, Zoroastrianism in Persia, Second Temple Judaism in Judea, and classical Greek philosophy and drama emerged with a few centuries of one another. Confucians worked the earth at the same time. Recently, an interdisciplinary team of scholars identified a common cause. It was not an aura of spirituality that descend on the plants, but something more prosaic. Energy capture the Arctic Age was when agriculture and economic advance provided a burst of energy, upwards of 20,000 calories per person per day in food, fodder, fuel, and raw materials. This surge allowed the civilization to afford larger cities, a scholarly and prestigious class, and the reorientation of their priorities from short-term survival to long-term harmony. As Bertolt's breach put in millennia later, grab first, then ethics. Whew.